Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe, where the mission is to normalize the conversation on sexuality while providing you with a real education on sex, intimacy, and relationships. You know, the one you never got in school, from your parents, friends, or the internet. I'm your host, Susan Morgan Taylor. As a sex therapist for couples, I've empowered thousands of couples around the world to get back on the same page in intimacy using my proprietary Pleasure Keys process. Find out more about that at pleasurekeys.com. Join me here at the Sex Talk Cafe for juicy and provocative conversations with the experts. Let's get down to it. Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sex Talk Cafe. And today, my guest is Ally Iseman. She's a writer, consultant, NCSF registered kink-aware professional relationship coach, and founder of the educational platform Passport to Pleasure. Ally is also a featured subject matter expert for the New York Times, Cosmo, Well and Good, Romper, PureWow, and Yahoo, and a contributing writer for Sexual Health magazine. As a certified consent and communication specialist, she teaches busy couples around the world the tools and skills they need to build the relationships they want and deserve. Whether you want to open up your relationship to include other people, or you just want to open up more authentically to each other, Ally will help you open up without blowing up. Ally, welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I am too. Well, so a lot of times people think that open relationship is just a lifestyle choice, but one of the things that you speak to is that it can also be an orientation that somebody is just sort of maybe even born with, or it's just a way that someone's naturally wired, kind of like a sexual orientation. And I'm curious if you could just speak a little bit to that. And I have a feeling that that's connected also to your own personal story and maybe how you came into this work. So if you could share with us a little bit about that too, I think that'd be a really great place to get started today.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You said it right there. It can be a lifestyle choice and it can be an orientation. So just like sexual orientation, there is a fluidity component as well. We are a really incredible species. Humans are capable of monogamy and non-monogamy, quote, naturally, which is always a question that comes up. You know, is monogamy natural? Is non-monogamy natural? Both actually are and are documented throughout our history. We are capable of both. We are also a species that is capable of, thoughts about our thoughts. That means we can self-reflect, we can self-analyze, we can look at, what are our needs and what can we put in place to support that. And we're growing and changing throughout our lives, right? We're not the exact same as we were, ideally, the day we were born. Some stuff's happened in between then and now.
Thank goodness.
Our relation, and our way of relating and connecting will shift and change as well. Like for me, I'll give you a little, snippet of my origin story, if you will.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't have the language, the term compersion. It's commonly known as the opposite of jealousy. It's the joy and pleasure you experience from your partner experiencing joy or pleasure with someone else. It can be sexual, but it is not explicitly so. It's like, think of the joy you experience when like your best friend gets a, promotion at work, or, your friend, whatever it is. It's empathetic joy, really, at the end of the day. For me, I would have compersion, which I thought was jealousy, when I learned about, my partner's crushes or previous experiences or whatever, and I enjoyed it. It felt good. I wanted to know more. I wanted to watch them flirt with somebody else.
Wow.
This was always kind of just a curiosity for me. And it flirted with the edges of, a little bit of discomfort, but majority pleasurable experience. So I thought that's what jealousy was. And I didn't understand why jealousy had such a bad rap. I was like, this is delicious. Like, this is fun. What's the problem? So I floated. I was I called myself a serial monogamist at the time, really serial non-monogamy, because monogamy means one partner your entire life, which is very rare. Most people are serial non-monogamous. So I was only dating men at this time for about the same amount of time. I'd be in a relationship for 2 years, then I'd be single for about, no more than 6 months, 4 to 6 months, then I'd be in the next relationship. And so in a couple of these relationships, I floated the idea of opening our relationship, maybe a threesome with another woman, and, got a couple partners that were down, never manifested, unfortunately. But I did end up in what became my last monogamous relationship. And this person is on the road often. They travel a lot for work. And so I was like, you know what? Hey, when you're out and about, a trip that I can't join you for, if you meet somebody, just send a, photo with their permission and have a great night and tell me about everything afterwards. I'd really love to experience that. And so he did end up meeting somebody, sent me a photo, and I guess they just stayed up all night talking, which was still wonderful. Like, it was really juicy. I was very excited. And another time he was away, I had a friend of mine coming into town, and this friend and I had known each other at this point 5, 6 years. And we had had a sexual history, but very much just friends. Like, it was like, we're just also attractive people who enjoy having sex. So we did that with each other as well. And so to me, I was like, this is very, safe. This is somebody I already know. I feel safe with. I feel comfortable. I know that there's no romantic potential here. Are you comfortable with this? He gave me what he called his green light. I had an amazing night with my friend. I found out his last relationship had been open. So we just had this really wonderful bonding experience. And it opened up for me what I call expansive love. I felt so connected to my partner who had, given me his green light, so connected, so grateful, so just like could not wait to see him. He was very, very much a part of that experience for me. And so we had agreed I would call him after the experience, and I did. And I was just gushing and I was just so happy and grateful. And I said, what do you want to hear? And I just heard dead silence. And then all he said was, I can't believe you did it. And so to this day, I honestly, I don't know if it was, he was testing me and, I love you more because I didn't kind of thing, or if he genuinely thought he'd be okay with it. And then when it happened, he just like couldn't handle it, which is fine. I just wish I wish both of us had had more skills around this. Obviously, I didn't have any of the skills that I have now. I would have done a lot differently. We needed to have way more conversations before we did what we did. We made all the mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So
blew it up.
this is what motivates my work. I'm like, I made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Like, it's a mess. So yeah, it was really painful, but it was that defining moment of like, no, this is real for me. I need to explore this. And I'm going to do it solo because I don't want any emotional casualties on my conscience after this.
Well, yeah, and I would like to get into what some of those skills are because I think they're extremely relevant, whether you're never wanting to open or you're curious about opening or you're already open. Those skills are really the fundamental thing that are valuable for intimacy in any relationship. And we'll get to that in a minute. But what I want to touch on first, it's so interesting that you had this experience of what you thought was jealousy was really what we call compersion, which is sort of that like getting pleasure and joy out of seeing your partner have other experiences. It's something that I think is more rare than jealousy, which is a different feeling. Well, at least that is what it seems like to me. I could be totally wrong about that. But you also say that jealousy can be your best friend. It doesn't have to be this thing to be avoided. It's one of those really uncomfortable feelings that generally nobody likes to feel it. And I think there's a lot of shame around jealousy also. So very rarely does somebody want to talk about it or much less know how to use jealousy in a way that's generative to a relationship and that can create more connection and where jealousy can be your BFF. So can you tell us about that? Like how does that even work?
Absolutely. I wish we had the stats on, like how frequently is jealousy experienced versus compersion versus zealophilia, which is like, when jealousy is a turn on, but we don't right now. Like we're starting to. There's incredible, incredible scientists and researchers, human behaviorists that are looking into getting a lot more stats around these things, but we don't have enough to be comparative yet. And also to your point, jealousy is something a lot of people are trying to avoid because of all this shame. We have a whole society built around making ourselves comfortable as possible. Always be it's if you're uncomfortable, something's wrong. But like, it's uncomfortable to lift weights. Like that's not like, wee, like it is uncomfortable to build a new skill. It is uncomfortable to grow. They're not called growing joys, right? They're growing pains. There is discomfort involved in growth. So when getting that understanding, I always say, if you take nothing else away from learning about consensual non-monogamy and multi-partner dynamics, take away the skill of expanding your capacity to hold discomfort. Because if you can be comfortable in being uncomfortable, it's a superpower. It will strengthen and improve every area of your life. You become superhuman. Because again, we have a whole society built around padding everything, avoid anything uncomfortable, but you're avoiding growth when you do that. So jealousy is just delivering information. It's showing us maybe an insecurity we have. Maybe we're in comparison with someone. Maybe there is, a history of deceit in the relationship. So there's some distrust that needs to be addressed. It's just a deliverer of information. So if you learn how to use it like a tool so you don't become one, it can become transformative in your relationships.
Oh, I love that. And I've heard some people say that in a monogamous relationship, it's easier perhaps to avoid like you can hide certain feelings or hide jealousy or avoid it more. It's not that it doesn't happen. It just can be brushed under the rug more easily versus in an open relationship. Would you agree that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, think of non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy as like exposure therapy, right? You have to face all these things that when you're following a prescription, compulsory monogamy, because please don't hear me ever saying as like non-monogamy good, monogamy bad. It's just a matter of making an informed choice for whatever relationship you want to be in, a relationship style you want to be in. But yeah, when you have that that sort of like social prescription of like, this is the relationship model, then it's really easy to kind of be lazy about it. You don't think you have to develop skills because this is just what you do. But it actually requires skills to be successfully in relationship with other people. Think about, all the like professional skill development programs there are, like how to be a leader in the room, how to excel at your job, how to be a leader among men. Like we're so comfortable developing relationship skills in all these other areas in our life, except our key core romantic, sexual, emotional relationships. What is
Yeah.
that?
Why? What? Yeah. Like, what the fuck? Like,
Of all the ones to work on.
why? I
Yeah.
wonder why. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, there's this assumption again, right? Like the social assumption of like, well, you probably had parents. They probably did, had a great relationship. They probably taught you really great relationship skills and communication skills, so you should be fine. What? There's probably a few people, beautiful, shining examples of that being possible, but most of us didn't have that experience.
Yeah.
So it's like the assumption that like, oh, well, your parents, drove a car, so you should probably know how to drive
Know
well.
how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they taught you. Maybe they taught you well. But based on how many
Probably
accidents are
not.
happening, I don't think so.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder too if there's, I think, gosh, I heard this was years and years ago. A friend of mine was saying something like, well, I don't want to have to work on the sexual part of a relationship should be easy. Like, and if I have to work on it, then I'm just not going to be interested in like having a sexual relationship with that person. And I just thought to myself, like, my gosh, like we work on every other freaking area of our lives. Why, when it comes to sex, it's suddenly we're just supposed to, oh, that part should be easy. And I think that some of that's the brainwashing that we get through media, right? And movies, and where everything's just great. And he just reads her mind and knows exactly how to touch her and what to do. And nobody has to like actually do the work or have a conversation. And I think that just does us a huge, huge disservice because, as you said, it takes skills. There's a whole set of skills that you have to have in order to not blow up. If you open up, you've got to have some skills. But what I also love about your teachings and your approach is you say that and I agree with this 100%, those same skills are highly applicable to a monogamous relationship, to a couple that maybe is never wanting to open up. But it's the same exact skill set that creates more connection and deepens the intimacy. And would just love to hear your perspective on that. And what are some of these skills that you think all couples, regardless of relationship style, that they need to have?
Yeah. Like I said, thinking of non-monogamy, consensual non-monogamy as like exposure therapy, where you're having to face all of those things head on, right? Like it's not imagining what it would be like if your partner has, meets somebody else. You are experiencing your partner meet somebody else. So you have to look at all those things. So you are constantly training yourself in strengthening your ability, again, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is most of life. Like it's not if you're going to meet a circumstance that makes you uncomfortable. It's just when. So that is a huge skill that you can take. Again, even if you never open up your relationship, can we develop our capacity in our relationship to have uncomfortable conversations? Can we talk about things that we're straight up scared to talk to each other about? Are you an invitation to your partner to be vulnerable? And do you feel comfortable and confident being vulnerable with your partner? That is intrinsically required for an intimate relationship.
It's huge. When I know before we got on the call, you said something really awesome that I think would be great to say here now that we're recording, but that an open, officially recording, that an open relationship doesn't necessarily mean you have to have other partners, but you can also be open in meaning that you're just authentic and you're in truth, moment by moment truth.
Exactly. You can, it's about, are you open relating is a term you'll hear. Okay. Are you open in your communication?
There you go.
And like, I might get pushback from people in the non-monogamous community. That's fine. You can have an open or closed monogamous relationship or non-monogamous relationship. Are you open in your communication? It's everything I just said. Do you feel like your relationship is a safe container in which you can both be uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have, again, it's not if, it's when. Even if you're monogamous, you are going to have things that are very uncomfortable and scary to talk about at some point. Yeah. And having an actual skill set for how to address those things in a safe way and have them be an opportunity to actually strengthen your relationship rather than, pulling back from each other is just priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have couples that are like, we want more passion in our relationship. And I'll say, if you want more passion, just start telling the truth. Like just
Yeah.
start, like really like bring it. And because that takes us a lot of times into these edges of discomfort. Like, oh my gosh, like what if I hurt their feelings? What if they don't like what I express a desire? Like it takes us to those edgy places, but the truth always I just call it truth, but what you're referring to is like open relating.
Yeah.
It's the same concept of just bringing what is. And that can just create so much more spaciousness and room for a deeper connection when that's happening. So I like the way you frame it though. It's like this open relating. It doesn't necessarily mean doesn't have to mean having other partners. It can, but it can also just mean having open communication.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And I'll say something a little edgy too, just about that.
Go for it.
What you just said of like, I'm afraid to share this because what if they react this way? And you're trying to make decisions for other people. I'm not going to say this because I don't want them to X, Y, Z. That's when you're getting out of boundary and into control. You're trying to control somebody else's experience. Now, I want to caveat, this doesn't mean dump everything all the time on your partner. Right. If there isn't value added by them knowing this information and it's just you alleviating your discomfort by giving it to them, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is if there is information that needs to be shared for the safety and growth of the relationship, come about it as kindly as you can, but it's your responsibility to share that information. Otherwise, you are making a decision for the other person, and that's controlling.
Well, I love this. So this brings me to the next thing I think is so awesome about what you teach and speak to, and our listeners need to hear this, the difference between boundaries, rules, and agreements. I think the lines get really blurred between those three things, especially
ironically.
Wonder why? Why could that be? So let's just talk about what's the difference between boundaries, rules, and agreements.
Yeah, so I'll break it down. This is as simplified as I can make it. Boundaries are about me. Rules are about you. Agreements are about we. So a boundary is, this is how I take care of myself. This is, what I need to feel safe, empowered, seen, sexy, etc. I'm inviting you to participate in that. If you can't, that's okay, but I'm still going to take care of myself. Boundaries involve consequence. Everything has consequence. Consequences are not inherently negative, but it's just like, if this happens, I'm going to take care of myself this way. That's all. Rules is you have to do this. Yeah. I'll break it down this way when it comes to like relationship dynamics. This is like a tough one for some people to understand sometimes, but we don't get to tell our partner whether or not they get to have other partners. We get to decide if we're comfortable being in a relationship with somebody who does or does not have other partners.
I love that.
That's the difference between boundaries and rules. Agreements are the relationship. That's basically boundaries for the relationship rather than an individual person. We're co-creating, we're collaborating on these boundaries for the relationship that we're in together. Yeah. So boundaries are me, rules are you, agreements are we.
I love that. And I have seen this conversation go sideways when...
No.
Never happens, where there's a confusion around the boundary piece. Well, all these three things, right? There can be this idea that, okay, this is my boundary, and because you didn't stick to my boundary, it now becomes a rule, which is like a limit on the other person's behavior. So now you can't do X, Y, Z because you violated my boundary. And there's just such a mix up there. Like with what you're saying, it makes so much sense and it's very clear, but I just can see how people go sort of sideways with this and have that lack of clarity when trying to implement.
You disempower yourself when you do that. To me, when you say, oh, it's all dependent on you and your behavior now. No, if I've stated a boundary and this is the boundary and you've crossed the boundary, and we'll talk about mistakes in a second, hopefully.
Yeah, okay, let's go.
Then I'm responsible for honoring whatever the consequences. If you do this thing, I don't feel safe, so I'm going to, take some space from the relationship, find another living situation. I'm good. Whatever the thing is that takes care of me. It's not on somebody else. Right. A boundary is an invitation to participate in self-care. Yeah. So when you turn it into a rule, you're taking your own power away from taking care of yourself. Agreed. And it's more uncomfortable, because it's hard to actually be like, oh shit, now I have to do the thing I said I was going to do. Damn. But if you don't have self-governance, you don't have empowerment. That is where your self-empowerment comes from. Absolutely. Is honoring those every time you don't honor, your side of the boundary, if you will. Yes. You're giving up your power. You are not taking care of yourself. Right. You are participating and crossing that boundary with the other person.
You're self-violating. You're violating 100%. Your own boundary.
100%. Now, in that conversation, it is important. Like I said, we do have to leave room for mistakes. Mistakes are different than patterns of behavior.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, mistakes are a huge part. And this is, again, no matter what kind of relationship you're in, monogamous, non-monogamous, mistakes are a part of learning. Like, we do have to make mistakes, and we have to, again, develop the skill to be comfortable being uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable when these things happen. But they can be opportunities if we lean in and we look at why did this boundary get crossed? Like, what created the environment for this to be possible? Do we need to renegotiate some of our relationship agreements? Are there needs not being met? Was there a miscommunication? I understood it to mean this, you understood it to mean that. It's an opportunity to really lean in and, again, strengthen that relationship. And it's very vulnerable. So it's actually going to increase your intimacy and deepen that connection as well. But it is uncomfortable because it's growth.
It's growth. And
But
growth
when
is
that
painful.
mistake keeps happening, that's the difference, right? So
Yeah.
a mistake happens, you look at it, you analyze it, you make the changes that need to happen together. And if it keeps happening, the same mistake after you've addressed it, after you've looked at it, that's a pattern now. That's a behavioral issue that needs to really be looked at, ideally with some professional support. And it's a totally different thing than making various mistakes here and there. Ideally, like, what's the saying? Like, I'm open to making mistakes, but never the same one twice, kind of thing. As long as you're
Or at least
learning
not
from
3
it.
times.
It's a
I might
value.
make it
Exactly.
twice, but not a third.
I like to say everything's better in at least 3s, but maybe not mistakes.
Maybe not mistakes.
You want to make different ones.
Well, it depends on the level of the mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, and really curious too. I know in the personal story that you shared, your partner was, well, appeared to be consenting of you saying yes to that opportunity. When you had the opportunity to be with somebody else intimately, you believed that your partner was consenting. However, it sounds like maybe consent really didn't happen, because it sounds like that person maybe was saying yes, or perhaps agreeing to something that they really were not okay with. And I have a feeling that that theme can come up a lot in this conversation with open relating. And can you speak to that a little bit, and how would one identify that? So to make sure consent is genuine, what are the skills that people would need to have? And like, how could we parse that out to make sure that those kind of things aren't happening? Because that just leads to more disconnect and resentment, right? If someone's saying yes
100%.
when they really mean no, that's not consent.
That's the blow up of the open up potentiality, right?
It's just a train wreck, people. Take notes.
Which, you can blow through everything and, hit the wall if you want and learn everything the hard way if you want, but it's not necessary. What you're talking about is informed consent. It's a really important part of the consent conversation. How can you give consent on something that you don't even understand, right? The way I'm a whore for metaphors, so you're going to hear me use a lot of metaphors. If you're aware that, I'm interested in swimming, I want to go swimming, you don't just jump in the Pacific Ocean. You find a local pool, you take some swimming lessons, maybe some group lessons, maybe some private lessons. There's a lot of learning that happens before you just dive right in. So many people right now, it's very exciting to see how many people are curious about potentially exploring multi-partner dynamics. All they know is they're curious. They think that means they want to open up their relationship. It just means they're curious, which again is why it's so important in relationships to be able to talk about things we're curious about. Because I've worked with couples who thought they wanted to open up and, invite other people into their relationship. They actually just wanted to be able to say it and talk about it and realize that was enough.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's exploring that curiosity, being able to be like, hey, I'm feeling this way. I'm curious about this. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Have you heard of this term even? So I tell people all the time, it's like they think the first conversation is, hey, I want to open up our relationship. How do I have that conversation? No, it's not. Absolutely not. Do you even know what that means? So it's kind of gauging where your partner is at. Hey, I've heard about this term, consensual non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy. Have you heard about it? Or I heard about this, this movie, You, Me, Her, or this show or this book or whatever. Like, what do you think? Do you want to read it together, watch it together? Like, what are your thoughts? Getting curious is where you start.
Yeah.
So learning is the key, right? That's the difference between opening up and blowing up. Find out information first.
Yeah.
First and foremost.
Slowly, people.
Yeah.
Slowly.
Feelings are one thing. Actions are another.
Yes.
Totally different.
Totally different things. Well, I've also found that sometimes couples believe that opening the relationship is the solution to maybe some challenges they're having. And a real common one is mismatched sexual desire. Like, well, we can't get on the same page, so why don't we just open a relationship, and then you don't have to worry about fulfilling my sexual desire because I can get that need met somewhere else. And my understanding is that shouldn't be, in general, shouldn't be used as a solution to fix problems in the relationship. And can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure we have listeners out there right now that are maybe thinking this, like, well, this would be a great way to solve this problem. And I wonder what your take is on that.
I'm going to say yes and no.
Okay.
Sorta. So it's a yes and. Opening up your relationship is a yes and, not an either or. So it's an additive. So it's not to be used to avoid something else. So if there's
Mm.
a recognition that, hey, we have mismatched libidos, mismatched desires, whatever that is, this is not the next stop. The next stop is exploring, what is that? Where is this coming from? Are there meeting points? Doing the work to really figure out what this is way before you look at opening up your relationship.
Uh-huh.
Opening up your relationship can provide an option depending on where this is coming from. Like the same way I like to say, sexless marriage is a big topic these days, right? Is consensual non-monogamy the solution to this? My answer is possibly, but there's a lot of questions and exploration that need to take place before that. In the same way that it's not fair to require another partner to have other partners, it's also not fair to require your partner to not have any partners.
Right.
When you enter into monogamy, that means one sexual and romantic partner, not none.
Yeah. Right. I
Any
agree.
more than it means twice.
Yeah, I
So,
don't think you can put
yeah.
someone in, force some, not
No.
force, but go into a monogamous agreement and then not have sex with that person. Like that's just wrong.
100%. But and don't hear me as saying like you are obligated or but you are obligated to investigate this because you've agreed to be in relationship. Relationship is a curious exploration of another
I
person.
love that.
So if you got to be in a conversation around that. It's not enough that again, this is where we're getting out of boundaries and into control and rules. I don't want to have sex, therefore you don't get to have sex. What? I don't get to tell you how many or how few partners you get to have, and you don't get to tell me that. We get to decide what kind of relationship we're each comfortable being in. That's it.
Well, I love what you just said is a relationship is a curious exploration of the other. That is so beautiful and so true. And I think if more of us had that approach to relationship, we'd have a very different experience in general. One of the things that you speak to is this idea that travel, see, that just reminds me because I'll use that like another person is like another universe, or it's like going to
100%.
a foreign country that you've never been to. And can we get curious about their
day.
experience? Every day. But I like that metaphor. And you relate that to non-monogamy. And I would love to hear you speak a little bit more to that is how is this non-monogamy journey like travel? In what way?
Yeah. Well, it goes kind of hand in hand with what you just said about, relationship as a curious exploration of another, because it's also an uncomfortable reflection of ourselves. So
that's the other soundbite. We're not going to use that one. That's after.
They go hand in hand. So the more partners you have, again, this is why it's not an avoidance of something. It's an additive thing. So any, issues you're trying to avoid in one relationship, they're going to come up in some version in another. So there's no getting away from that. So to your point of like another person is another universe, 100%. I hear a lot of times, like, oh, we finish each other's sentences. And I'm just like, isn't that called interrupting? Like you have no idea. You know what they've said. So you have a basis looking in the past on what is probably maybe what they're going to say, but you actually don't know what they're going to say. So allowing your partner to be a new person every day, yes, you're developing the security and the ongoing, familiarity. And that's where, potentially the excitement of other partnerships can come into play. It's new, it's fresh, but again, it's not an avoidance of something that you're already building. It's an additive too. So there's so many different types of desire that you can explore when you have other partners. You can have, a purely specifically a kink partner. You can have a partner that you do this other particular activity with. There's this idea that we need all things met by one person. You have to have all the same interests as me, be willing to do all the things that I'm interested in. And if not, then you're not a match. You have to provide, you have to be my mentor, my, financial advisor, my emotional, comfort. Like it's insane. We depend, there's a great quote from Esther Perel that I'm going to butcher. We now require from one single person what we used to get from an entire village. An entire village.
It's a lot of pressure. It's too much.
It is. It really, really is. And it frees you up when you realize that you are no more obligated than your partner is to you to provide all of those things. It frees you up to be like, what can they provide? What is here? If I don't need everything, that's so much pressure, then you're actually available for what is.
Yeah, that's so true. There's not so much demand on one person or on the relationship. And I'd like to add that that's also a conversation, even if you're not interested in opening to other partners, you want to stay monogamous, that we find other things that meet the needs that our partner isn't interested in meeting or can't meet. There's other ways to have those needs met that still honor the relationship. And I'm just putting that out there for those listeners who maybe aren't interested in opening, but they're thinking, how do my partner can't meet all these. So then what are my options? We have a lot of options out there, and it's a matter of identifying those. And maybe the conversation is on opening, and maybe it's on finding other things that fulfill those needs that it maybe doesn't involve opening.
Well, and that's the power of understanding what your needs are and really understanding what consensual non-monogamy is. It's not an escape.
Okay, well, that's where I was going next because I think with people who don't understand non-monogamy, a lot of times what you'll hear is, "Oh, it's just a way to avoid relationship or responsibility," or there's this myth that you don't go deep in multiple
Hmm.
relationships, right? That it's just a way
Yeah,
to keep it shallow. And can you speak to that and why that's not true
100%.
necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're someone who has avoidant attachment and is not looking at that and working on that and deciding, how you want to work with that in your relationships, any relationship dynamic is still going to be the same thing. Like you can be avoidant in any relationship dynamic. It's not exclusive to
Yeah.
monogamy or non-monogamy. You can also be incredibly committed and deep and connective in any relationship dynamic as well. It's not intrinsic to the dynamic itself. It's intrinsic to the people creating the relationship. So it's what
Yeah.
kind of relationship do you want to have? If you're using non-monogamy to avoid depth somewhere and you skip to the next partner, like, yeah, but you can also avoid intimacy in a monogamous relationship. There's plenty of people doing that right
Yeah.
now.
Right. And sexless marriages, probably.
Yeah, that can be
um,
definitely a cause of that.
yeah. What's the difference between cheating and is cheating possible in a non-monogamous relationship?
Cheating is about lying and deceiving another person. It's about not honoring agreements, whatever relationship dynamic you're in.
Mm.
It's about crossing that line intentionally. So you don't even have to have sex with somebody to be cheating. First
Mm-hmm.
of all, do you even know how you define sex? Does your partner define sex the same way as you do? Is that the line that you've created together for what constitutes infidelity? Have you had that conversation? If you don't have a clearly defined agreement, which again is a boundary for your relationship, it's really easy to step over something that hasn't been discussed.
Mm.
But really, at the end of the day, it's about crossing over something that has been clearly defined with
Yeah.
intention.
Well, yeah, and I find that there's a lot of assuming that can happen, particularly around this in possibly in open relationships. But I do see it. I primarily work with monogamous couples myself. So you see that there's these assumptions about what cheating means or doesn't mean. Like no one's
A lot
ever
of
actually
assumptions.
had, I think you tend to
Yeah.
have it more if you do have an open relationship.
Yeah.
But right, you just assume that you have the same understanding of cheating when really you've never sat down and defined what that is and what that looks like. How one partner
Yeah.
might define it can look really different from how the other does. So what you're
The
saying is
standard
have a
Yeah, like the,
conversation.
the standard social prescription for a relationship is just a series of assumptions. Like I'm going to assume
Yeah.
we're on a date. I'm going to assume that means the same thing to you as it does to me. I'm going to assume
Yeah.
that we're, exclusive. I'm going to assume that means the same thing as it does to me as it does to you. Well, now we're, official. Now we're living
Yeah.
together. I'm going to assume that means there's so many assumptions that take place along what's called the relationship escalator, this assumption of progress in a one way of being together, that it's really easy to be, quite frankly, lazy and
Yeah.
just sort of fall into a relationship and then make all these assumptions and expectations over your partner that you never even talk about. You don't even
Mm.
give each other a chance to show up for each other when you relate like that.
Wow. Yeah.
Non-monogamy is just exposure therapy.
Mm.
It's forcing you to be present and productive in your relationship.
I love it. And open relating, open communicating is sort of the
Hmm.
same version of that in a monogamous relationship. How one might apply the same principles of non-monogamy to a monogamous situation. And I'm just speaking to that because I know some of my listeners are, perhaps interested in how do we apply some of these skills to our
Hmm.
relationship because it's important. We need them regardless of
Yeah,
whether we're going to open or
100%.
stay closed. These are fundamental skills of every relationship that we need to have if we want to have more closeness and connection. And assuming what you're saying is the assuming because there's such a narrative around how things are, how we expect them to be, how we assume that they are, we get stuck in that. We get lazy in that. And
Oh, yeah.
we need to develop skills to get out of that, especially if we want to have more connection.
Exactly. And we're not taught relationship as a skill set. It's this assumption. You had parents, they probably taught you the great skill. Like this whole thing that most of us didn't go through.
Yeah.
It is actually a skill set. We develop it in so many other areas of our life, work, etc. Why not in our most important relationships,
Yeah.
our
And the
foundational
intimacy.
relationships?
Yeah.
And
Why
that's
is that?
yeah,
We don't want to talk about
I'm never endlessly fascinating to me. It's like we have no problem dropping thousands of dollars on like become a better leader at work and learn how to communicate powerfully and da 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 da. But then it's like you're just supposed to somehow know how to do that romantically. Like when you're also adding in emotions and like needs and all that stuff, that should be easier
it should be
somehow. Like,
easy. I think we have Disney. We should blame Disney for this.
well, this is what I have to say about Disney that I want all of you to remember. Every single fairy tale and Disney movie ends at the beginning of the relationship. So
Oh,
if you want that happily ever after, that's where the work actually is. I want to know how Ariel and Prince Eric do their taxes.
yeah.
That's what I'm interested in. You're telling me she had a whole, treasure trove of goodies under the ocean and not a single sex toy? Bullshit.
Yeah, come on. She
I want
had
to know
some
where the work
dildos
came
down there.
in.
Yeah,
Exactly.
she had some vibrators.
I
Come
want the
on.
real talk here. Okay. That's
maybe
the
this-
happily ever after.
Yeah, right. Or go read the original versions of those fairy tales.
There's that.
I mean, come on. Yeah, not a happy ending,
Yes.
let me tell you.
No, the Brothers Grimm were dark.
Oh, yeah, very.
Very, very dark. But that's also too, like, if you take nothing else away from this conversation, and I hope you take a lot away from this conversation, but if you take only one thing, know that educating yourself about multi-partner dynamics, consensual non-monogamy, even if you choose monogamy, will only strengthen your relationship. There is absolutely no harm in learning about it. And again, being curious and learning is not the same thing as jumping in and doing something. But learning these skills empowers you in your relationship to actually make the choice of your relationship.
Yes, that was beautifully said. And I think that's a lovely place to start to wrap up our conversation for today. Tell our listeners where they can find you and how they can connect with you out there.
Yeah, I'm on all the things at Passport to Pleasure. It's the number 2, the numero 2, passport2pleasure.com. I'm on Substack, Instagram. Those are the 2 best places to reach out to me. YouTube, I release a ton of content. I do a weekly free edutainment, I call it, relationship skill edutainment. So video with lots of fun, entertaining, educational information. I do a monthly advice column. I do a live where I talk to my subscribers as well on Substack. But yeah, Substack, Instagram, YouTube, Passport to Pleasure, the number 2.
Great. And I'll make sure that is in the show notes. That's Passport to Pleasure with the number 2 in the middle. Well,
and
Ally,
if you're curious, oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No.
I want to share really quick.
Yeah, please.
If you guys are listening and you're curious to get curious, if you're wondering, like, is my relationship in a good enough place to even learn about this? I created a free tool called the Relationship Ratio that tells you if you're in a good place to start getting curious and learning more. So when you go to my website or you go to passport2pleasure.com/ratio, you can download that for free as a thank you for joining my newsletter.
Awesome. What a cool resource. I hope everybody will go and take that assessment or download the resource. And Ally, it's been such a delight talking with you today. Thank you so much for being my guest on Sex Talk Cafe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for the Sex Talk Cafe. Please be sure to leave a 5-star review, subscribe, and share this podcast with your friends. And if you're ready to discover the 3 secrets to deepening connection, enhancing pleasure, and expanding your orgasmic potential, then be sure to grab your copy of the Pleasure Keys ebook at pleasurekeys.com. To learn more about my private coaching, couples retreats, and other offerings, be sure to connect with me at pathwaytopleasure.com or find me on social media at Susan Morgan Taylor. Thank you again so much for joining me today for the Sex Talk Cafe.